Welcome to the Midlife Sex Coach for Women podcast, the only show that combines a fun personality, medical knowledge, sexual counseling, and life coaching together to create unique sex coaching that helps busy women awaken their libidos, address intimacy issues, and learn how to express their sexuality for the rest of their days. Here's your host, certified life coach and sexual counselor, Dr. Sonia Wright.
Hello, my beautiful diamonds. You are listening to the Midlife Sex Coach for Women podcast, episode 232. So good to have you here. I am super excited about the conversation that we are going to be having today. So, first I should start with my introduction. You are listening to the Midlife Sex Coach for Women podcast, episode 232. And it's going to get better and better and better. Okay. So tonight I'm super excited because I have my special guest and my partner here tonight, Dr. Kimmery Newsom. And I brought her on because she is a marriage and family therapist of over 20 years. And I have some questions. I want to talk about the not tonight. Like this started with, I think it was a TikTok post that I did, and somebody responded to my not tonight, my theory of what I think is so great about, being honest and saying not tonight. And he was like, hey, but what happens if not tonight turns into not this century? Like what's happening here? Like, what should I do? Should I just give up? And so I a couple of podcasts back, I talked about my concept around that, but I also wanted to bring in the person that's got 20 plus years dealing with not tonight. Not just with me, but with her clients too. And like, what does she do when a couple shows up and they've been dealing with this and it has really impacted the relationship? So I'm going to have Dr. Kimmery Newsom introduce herself, and then we're going to have a conversation about not tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Sonia. It's really good to be here with you today. And yes, I am a marriage and family therapist. I have been working with couples and individuals for over 20 years. And it's just really interesting to see just kind of the iterations and the changes over time, how couples kind of manifest themselves in their communication and things of that nature. So I'm really excited to get that conversation. But a little bit about me. I am the founder and CEO of Kimmery Newsom Consulting, and I am an equity strategist as well. And so a lot of the work that I do is along the lines of repair. In addition to that work, I'm also a program director for the marriage and family therapy program at a university here. And I supervise students in their practicum, as well as helping guide them and lead them into the next generation of clinicians. So that's a part of the work that I do. I've also been in academia for about 20 years, so I've had a really long career in two areas simultaneously. So I'm really excited to talk to you about these things.
Cool. So I'm super excited to have you here. Okay. So when you have a couple that comes to you, okay, I'm going to actually start a little bit back. There's a couple, right? And the woman generally is like, not tonight. I'm not interested. And what I said on my last podcast is basically there's a lot that's going on here, and it kind of needs to be unpackaged or whatever. Like my concept is when somebody says not tonight, they're saving the relationship because they're choosing not to have sex intimacy when they don't want to. And like that's kind of going through the moves. That's not when you're particularly into it. You're just like, okay, I just got to get this over with. And you just kind of go through the motions and get it done as soon as possible. But that's not quality intimacy. You're not like looking into each other's eyes. Your mind is thinking about what do I have on my list to take care of tomorrow? If I could just get this over quickly. You're like, are you done yet? Like that, like your mind is somewhere else. It's not in the game. It's not in having the fun, but it's like, I got to get to sleep. I got a busy day tomorrow, all those things. So for all those reasons, I was like, not tonight. But there's a lot going on here. We don't know what's on the person's mind, why they're saying not tonight. It might be an exhaustion thing. It might be that they need connection that starts earlier in the day. It may be that that connection has been lost a long time ago and they're since you do repair, there needs to be some repair of that work. But there's like a lot of different meanings behind not tonight. But when it continues on and feels like it's not the center, I also recognize that the partner has a lot of issues around rejection as well. Like they're just trying to connect with their partner, have some sexual intimacy, and instead they're dealing with what they perceive to be rejection quite a bit of the time. It's not necessarily about them, but it may be who. So when a couple comes to you and they've been dealing with a lot of this, not necessarily engaging in sexual intimacy, at risk for having a sexless relationship, and there's a lot of not tonight going on, how do you approach that?
Well, I think the first thing is you find the kind of the root cause, right? And so we use this term in cognitive behavioral therapy is where you drill down and you're drilling down to the kind of the core idea behind why not tonight exists, right? So every now and again, not tonight is a thing that can happen. But if you're hearing it consistently over and over again, then you kind of got to get down to the core. You were talking about that just a little bit in your opening. And so I think the main thing is really getting to the idea behind why not tonight has become so comfortable.
It's interesting because I don't know if it's comfortable. Like for the person that's saying not tonight, maybe it feels comfortable, but a lot of times it's associated with a lot of guilt and shame and regret. So, but I guess it would be more comfortable to choose not tonight than to address the underlying issue.
That's exactly right. Instead of having the conversation with your partner and saying, um, we've been disconnected and I don't really want to connect physically. It's easier to say when your partner makes advances, yeah, I'm not feeling it tonight. That's not what I want to do tonight. And that doesn't get to the issue. It actually helps things build because it doesn't provide a space for there to be a conversation, even with the partner trying to, say, well, why not? There's usually that's just kind of a shutdown point. There's not a place of really being able to explore a little bit more. And so that's what I mean by comfort. It's like it's comfortable because nobody is being challenged in that moment to go deeper.
Okay, so nobody's being challenged in the moment to go deeper. So how do you, because I talk a lot about consent and safety and vulnerability around these concepts and ideas. How do you make it such that when you're talking with clients that they feel safe enough to actually unpack like the knot tonight?
hmm Yeah. Well, the first thing you have to do is create an environment where communication is essential. Right? And so sometimes people come into couples therapy and they have an expectation they'll continue the same types of things that they do at home.
Mm,
No, the stonewalling or the shutting down or saying the trigger word that gets the partner upset and then the conversation shuts down, right? But in the therapy room, you have to establish that there will be rules around communication. And some of those ways, there's a long time ago when I was in therapy school, over 20 years ago, I learned about this concept called the floor. And so you can have like a stapler in your office and you hand it to the person. The person who has the stapler is the person who's talking. And the one who does not have the stapler, their responsibility is to reflect back what they heard from the person, not verbatim, but the underlying message that they heard. And then the person who had the stapler who was talking, it's their job once the reflection has happened to say, yes, that was exactly what I'm talking about, or no, that's not quite it. And then the other person is asking clarifying questions to get to what they were trying to convey. Then the roles get reversed. The person who was not the speaker now has the stapler, and the person who was the speaker formerly now is the listener. So it's a speaker listener technique. And what that does is it creates a space where they're starting to practice the back and forth of what it's like to have these conversations that can go efficiently, which makes it a little bit easier once we start to talk about the real issue of, why is not tonight a thing? Then it makes it easier to have that conversation because they're used to doing the rules of the speaker listener technique. And
mm.
it's also something you can bring them back to when they get off track because they will. When they fall into old patterns, you can bring them back to the speaker listener technique. And so usually you try some benign stuff first, nothing real, loaded first, something about like, what'd you do at work today? And how did something at work make you feel today? That sort of thing.
Mhm.
Right.
Yes.
And so really getting them used to the concept of having these conversations and the ways in which you can have effective communication.
And so, like, that's one of the first things that you learned during therapy school and stuff like that. And so how often do you find that that works?
Oh,
Like
it works probably about 95% of the time, seriously, because you're establishing the kind of a code of conduct
mm,
in the ways that communication needs to take place. And often we have couples carry it through at home too, where
mm.
they use like a can of beans or something as the instead of a stapler. And whoever has the beans is the one who's speaking, and who doesn't have the beans is listening and enacting the parts that they have to in that role.
So the can of beans, person with the can of beans holds all the cards.
Hold all the cards.
Talk about beans. You burned the beans today, but
Hey,
okay.
why you
We're
gotta
gonna
bring
say
that
about that
into the podcast? So like,
because that just gonna be real.
mhm, it gotta be like that. I said I'm sorry.
Okay, all righty, all right. Okay, so getting back to that was too funny not to. I just could
I
not.
know, I
Um,
know. I've
I was
walked
like,
right
"Why
into
didn't you
that.
talk to me about the beans?" Suddenly, you didn't message or mention anything about that beans I left on the stove with the strict instructions for you to follow.
Okay, I had stuff I was doing too,
It's true.
and I
It's true.
got distracted.
It's true.
Sorry.
And so I will give you a can of beans later on, and we will have a discussion about the burnt beans.
Let me be the speaker first, though.
Okay, okay, okay,
And then
okay.
you gotta be the listener.
I gotta listen. Okay. So getting back to so okay. Um, what happens when people are not following the code of conduct in the
Mhm.
room or outside of the room? You know, that
Yeah.
so much has gone on and they feel really defensive or
Mhm.
like they can't like they got to get their words in and they
Yeah.
like the only thing they have left in their arsenal is like digs that they have for each other. Is it like is the relationship done at this point? Is can there be repair?
Well, I mean, I think there can be repair. Each person has to be willing to engage in the process of repair in order for it to happen, right? But I think at that point, that's when you really kind of have to keep drilling down into why are you holding on to this?
Mm,
What is the core idea behind why you need to continue to communicate this way when we've made efforts to try and change our communication styles and the ways in which we convey information and messages to one another? Because there's got to be a reason why you holding on to digs, right?
well, I think it's like they're just so hurt, you know, they just feel so much like they don't want to feel vulnerable with this person. And that like the only thing they have left is maybe the digs to like harm them in some way because they've been harmed in such a way, you know.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's correct and what should be done. I'm just, you know, when people get to that place where you're like, ooh, damn, you know, like I'm not sure if this is gonna work or not, you know. Or when
Yeah.
people are desperate, like that person that's like, "It's not this century," right?
Mhm.
It sounded like there was a lot of pain underneath the surface of the joke, you know,
Mhm. For sure.
and, a lot of having to deal with rejection in there, you know,
Mhm.
and, like, to be vulnerable again
Mhm.
in a different kinda way in an office with, you know, like your partner, but also a stranger that like that now
Mhm.
you have to talk about your feelings of rejection or whatever else is going on there. Like
Mhm.
how can it be safe? How can it be safe for them to have these conversations and to kind of hope again that something might actually change?
Yeah, and I hear you on that, and, there's no predictability of that,
Mm,
honestly. You take a risk being in a relationship in general, and you take a risk loving someone,
mm,
and the risk is that they will hurt you. That's the risk. And so it doesn't mean that people are out here just trying to hurt people. There are people who do that. But it means that, you run the risk and the possibility that someone will cause you some pain emotionally,
mm,
and that is hard. It's not an easy place to be, and especially if the pain that you've been caused emotionally is causing you to withdraw from sexual activity.
mm,
And the withdrawal from the sexual activity is a symptom of a larger problem. And the problem doesn't necessarily even have to be within the relationship itself. It could be, as you talk about all the time, it could be, with some physiology that the person who is saying not tonight is dealing with,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so in order to get to the core of what's happening, we have to create this space where the conversation can be effective and people are listening and reflecting back and being heard. And so, you practice that and you practice that until, you get to a place where people are feeling comfortable enough to enact that on their own outside of sessions.
Mhm.
And it just takes time, especially if there's a history of hurt. It takes time, but there's no way to get to that history. There's no way to get to the core idea without the communication. You can't.
Yeah. So, like, I always say that, like, intimacy, sexual intimacy is based on a foundation of overall intimacy, which is based on the foundation of communication. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that communication is built on a foundation of trust.
Yes.
And when that trust has been eroded, because of the little digs or like people being hurt and back and forth and stuff like that,
Mhm.
um, then it gets to that place where like you have to can you repair the trust by the communication? Like, will that go back and repair the trust? If the foundation is that
Mhm,
trust overall,
mhm,
and you're building the communication on that, can you retroactively, retrograde, retro whatever, get down to healing the trust side of thing? Or how does that get healed?
It often it's a process, right? And some people do what we call wiping the slate clean. Right? They get to a certain point and they're like, "I just need to wipe the slate clean. I need to clean we need a fresh start in our relationship, but before we do that, we need to deal with what has caused the pain and consternation previously." Right? But we can't get to a clean slate without addressing it. And a lot of times partners agree, "Yes, yes, let's do this clean slate."
Mhm.
But then they realize that there's a lot of work that goes into it. They have to actually look at what has caused the pain, what has caused the stuckness, and be willing to move through it and to process through it and talk through it. So it's not an overnight process. It's not an easy process either by any means. But there are people who get through it because they choose to do the work. And there are some people who start the work and they don't necessarily finish it because it gets really hard. And the level of vulnerability that you have to display in that is astronomically large. I don't know how else to say it. It's big, right? Like you have to have big vulnerability in order to be willing to look at things that have caused you pain, right? Maybe they've never said to that person that your little digs are what make me say not tonight every night. 'Cause you always got something to say, right? And I ain't even trying to deal with that. I ain't trying to deal with the ramifications of that, and I'd rather deal with you being mad at me and not talking to me because I said not tonight than deal with the little digs that you give me on a daily basis. Maybe
Mhm.
they've never said that out loud. And
Yeah.
so if you get to a process where you're having to drill down to the core belief and idea about you and your relationship, that's hard. It's a hard place to be. Is it worth it? Absolutely. If you worked, working on your relationship, absolutely. But it's not an easy thing. It's not.
No, it's not an easy thing, and it's interesting that when you said, like, working on wiping the slate clean, like, something in my very soul was like, "Hell no!" Like, what kind of bullshit is not to you specifically, but just, like,
That makes
everything
sense,
about
Dr. Sonia. That tracks.
I'm like, "I'm gonna remember everything so I don't repeat this, like, so it doesn't happen again, so I don't let my guard down," and
Mhm.
and I'll be like, what so, you're probably the only person I would consider wiping the slate clean with. Most of the time, I'd be like, "Mm-mm, no, you fooled me once, but you ain't gonna do it twice." But that trust is there and as it has been established, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that that's a really hard thing to be like, "Let's wipe the slate clean."
Mhm.
Wow. Like, I think that I'm trying to think, is there anything harder to do than to wipe that slate clean? I can do forgiveness if I ain't gotta see you again.
'Cause you said forgiveness does not equal reconciliation, okay? Like That is not
I
what
can
we
love
do
you from
around here.
afar, right? But
Yeah.
like to have you up in my face and I gotta be like, when like something comes to my mind as to what a person's done, and then I gotta be like, I'm wiping it clean. But you're right. You're like, you don't just wipe it clean. You have
Mhm,
this conversation. You be
mhm.
like, hey, look, this, and this happened, bitch. And we're not to you. This is all hypothetical. I would never call you that. And then, like, have to process and get through
Yeah.
everything, like, to get to that place where and that's where maybe the stapler or the can comes in. See,
Mm.
my thought is like, "Give me the can, I'm hucking it at your head."
Why you gotta see? Mm. Okay, we're gonna give you a sheet of paper,
I know!
like, give you a sheet of paper, like,
What do I do
"Darn."
with the sheet of paper? Oh, so
You hold
I
it.
can't okay, I can't have see, my rights to bean a can of beans have been taken away.
Gone.
I've already lost my rights.
Done.
All right, okay. All right, fine. So no can of beans, no stapler for me. I get
No.
a piece of paper that I
Yep.
can fold into a little airplane, and then I'll do the little front there and I'll like huck it at somebody. No, no. Okay, anyway, so this is supposed to be helpful for my diamonds, but diamonds, it's been a long day. I'm recording this at night, and so my filter is on low. I should always record early in the morning where I'm like, it's Dr. Sonia. I'm in my studio. It's 5 a.m. Let's talk about not tonight. But instead, it's 7 p.m. at night. The filter is gone.
Yeah.
And we're still going to continue this conversation because I think it's an important conversation. Okay.
Definitely.
So trust has to be there,
Mhm,
communication, the
mhm,
ability to process and talk and get to a place of reconciliation
mhm,
and forgiveness if that works for you.
mhm.
And recognizing that like I guess for like my brain would have to know what would the benefit be of wiping that slate clean. Like
Right.
have an understanding that okay, I want to preserve the relationship. I
Mhm.
want to have that reconnection with my partner and the price to be paid for this is conversation and wiping the slate clean after that conversation.
Yes.
And then that could lead to, possible, like, reconnection. But then, of course, there is other we as you say, you do have to drill down and
Mhm,
get to that place where you're like, "What exactly is going on? What is it?"
mhm.
Is it resentment? Is it a physical thing? Because perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, like, there's hormones going on, there's, like, hormone regulation that's
Mhm,
happening, physiological changes, there could
mhm.
be pain, there could be irritation with the vulva, there could be a lot stuff. There could be the fact that orgasms have shifted completely. They're not
Mhm,
as strong as they would, or maybe like there's some women, unfortunately, that don't have an orgasm after they go through menopause,
mhm.
and then our bodies change too. So like there's so many different reasons that we might be like, yeah, no, I don't really want somebody to touch me, because a lot of those things are happening. So part of it
Mhm.
is that trust and that communication around whatever issue happens to be. And then, getting it back together where you're reintroducing the touch, where you're reintroducing the pleasure. That's
Yeah.
something that becomes something that's important as well. And there's things like sensate focus and stuff like that. But how do
Mhm.
you deal with like reintroducing the sex into a relationship?
Well, it's a process, right? And I've said that about everything that you've asked me about.
Yes.
It's a 'cause it is, right? It's not something you be like, "Okay, now go home and touch," like
You just get it
I ain't
on.
touched her in weeks, I ain't touched him in weeks. What I look like going home and touching today? So no, like that's not it's a process, right? And usually what I've done in the past with couples who have had issues that are related to sexual intimacy and touch is that, we start with something very simple, something just sit across from one another and just look at each other. 5 minutes, right? And then the next thing you do the next day or maybe the next week, you come back and you report how that went. And then the next step is if it went well, the next step after that would be okay, now we sit in front of one another and you take off one article of clothing, usually like a top. And so each of you is shirtless with the woman if she wears a bra with her bra on, or the female presenting person if they wear a bra on And then they sit and they can have a conversation or they can look at one another, right? So you go through each article of clothing until there's no clothes, still not touching, being able to sit and admire one another, right? But this is a process because sometimes people come back after the first one and they're like, yeah, that went well. We were able to sit, we had our clothes on, we were able to have that conversation, or we were able to just look at one another and, for that time, and it was good. They go and try session number 2, which is taking their tops off, and they're like, I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
I couldn't do it.
Mhm.
Right. And so then you go from there. So you don't rush through the progression. That's why I'm saying it's a process. The end goal is to get to a place where you can actually, cuddle and touch one another without there being any type of discomfort, right? Even no sex involved. But being able to get to that place. And if sex does come into the play after that, after you walk through all those processes, that's great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. But the purpose is to get the reconnection and to get the physical reconnection, whatever that might look like,
Right.
in the most consensual and helpful way for everyone.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Mm.
So, we've had the conversation, we've had the meeting of the minds, we're reestablishing the trust, where they're having the conversation with respect. We're reflecting it back against,
Mhm,
to each other, and then we're bringing back in the touch, we're bringing back in the physical aspect of things.
mhm,
Not that we need like a timeline for this, but on average, how long do
mhm.
you think that this whole process usually takes for the average couple?
I've run through this process with folks in about 2 months,
Okay. Alrighty. Okay.
2 months, where
Mhm.
they're doing each of these iterations once a week.
Once a week.
And they're coming in the following week, right? So they go home and they have their homework and they do it, and then they come back the following week because 'cause they're seeing me weekly,
Mhm.
and then they move on to the next one. We process through what it was like to do it, any of the discomfort that they experienced, the things that were comfortable about it, and just kinda, really doing the speaker listener type of situation again so that they can have an opportunity to really hear and be reflected back to and to reflect back what they heard and create a collective understanding and then moving on to the next part. So
Okay. So when they're doing this process, like, do
Mhm.
you have the communication and the talking comes first and then you go to the physical, or is that still continuing to happen while the physical is being reintroduced?
It's both. 'Cause
Mm,
you have to have a streamline of communication throughout the process, because
mm,
sometimes it's a situation where they don't have any physical issues, they just don't like how they're being touched, and they wanna be touched differently, right?
okay.
And so they need to be able to have that through line of communication so that they can say, "When you did this last time, I really liked that, but this one I didn't really like so much," right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
getting the comfort level and the person who's being told how to touch differently getting
Mm,
the comfort level of being told that they need to do something differently, and they're not doing it wrong, they just need to do
yeah.
something differently, right? So, you have to have that through line of communication in this process in order for it to be effective.
So good. So I think that we will end our conversation now. We will have to have personal conversation about the beans. That's still going to happen. But I think I need you to come back to talk about, like, what is it like for women to ask for what they want? What is it
Mm,
like for partners to hear the different requests, and how does that go? Because I think that that's a whole other conversation that I
mhm,
would love to get your expertise on. So, just so that everybody knows, Dr. Kimmery does not take private clients at all, but she is in my Diamond Intimacy Collective, and she does do relationship coaching in there, and she comes in as a special guest. So,
mhm.
if you're at all interested, please come and join us in the Diamond Intimacy Collective. Okay, that is all for this call today, and it's so good to have you, Dr. Kimmery. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest. And even though I spilled the beans, okay.
Cannot.
I did. As I say, it's late. My brain has gone offline. That filter is completely gone. And I think that it's important for my diamonds to see all different sides of me, that
Yeah, for
so
sure.
that they wouldn't just think like I've got it all together every minute of every day. Most of the time, I'm just mischievous and fun.
Yeah, it's very true.
But at 5 in the morning, I have like the most amount of mental bandwidth. I don't know what you call
Yeah,
it, like, because
yeah.
I'm just waking up and I'm like, let's talk about what's been on my mind. Okay, so diamonds, it's been a pleasure, Dr. Kimmery. It's always a pleasure. And we will see you next week. Okay, Dr. Sonia and Dr. Kimmery out. Take care.
Bye.
If you've been listening to this conversation and realizing that stress, overwhelm, anxiety, or disconnection are showing up in your relationships, your family, or even your connection with yourself, it may be time to start with your nervous system. That's why I'm so excited to partner with Dr. Ali Novinsky and her Family Reset program. This program is designed to help regulate the nervous system, not just for individuals, but for couples, families, and even extended family members. Because when our nervous systems are more regulated, communication improves, relationships become healthier, and intimacy has that space it needs to grow and flourish. In many ways, nervous system regulation is the foundation upon which intimacy is built. And because I believe so strongly in Dr. Ali's work, when you join the Family Reset program through my affiliate link, you'll also receive a year's worth of time inside the Diamond Intimacy Collective. This is a complete bonus added on top of everything that you'll get in Dr. Ali's program because I believe so much in the foundation of regulating your nervous system in order to do intimacy work. That's how much I believe in combining the nervous system regulation with intimacy coaching and how that can create a lasting transformation. So if you've been ready to create more connection, more calm, and more intimacy in your life, click the link in the show notes to learn more. Until next time, remember, you're not broken, you're not too late, and your next chapter of intimacy can be your very best one yet. Okay, Dr. Sonia out.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Midlife Sex Coach for Women podcast. If you enjoyed Dr. Sonia's fun and caring approach to sexual intimacy, head to soniawrightmd.com to learn more.